How many times have you heard that? In school, at home, in job interviews where you're begging for dignity disguised as opportunity. But what if it's not true? What if effort is not the ladder we've been told it is? What if that ladder only leads in circles, back to the same place, the same struggle, the same exhaustion? You wake up early, you stay late, you chase degrees, promotions, the next milestone like a ghost you can never quite touch. And yet, you're still anxious, still broke, still doubting your own worth. Why? Because meritocracy is not a promise, it's a performance, a play designed to make you believe that your pain is your fault, that your failures are proof of your laziness, that your suffering is deserved. It's the most elegant prison ever built, because it doesn't need walls. It just needs belief. You see, meritocracy tells you that success is a choice, but never mentions the inheritance of wealth. The private schools, the social networks built in boardrooms, not classrooms, the safety nets woven from family names, while you are taught to grind, to hustle, to sacrifice your health and time for a shot at dignity. Others are born into rooms you're not even allowed to enter. Imagine a marathon where some start at the finish line, and you're told that if you just run hard enough, you'll catch up. That's not a race. That's humiliation. Marx once wrote, "The ruling ideas are nothing more than the ideal expression of the dominant material relationships, and nothing expresses that better than the myth of meritocracy, an idea that tells the working class their chains are made of choice, that obedience is virtue, and that questioning the system is failure, but deep down, you felt it, haven't you? That silent scream when you do everything right and still feel wrong, when you give your best and are told it's not enough, when your spirit aches for purpose, but all you're offered is performance. This isn't just a flaw in the system, it is the system, a system that needs you to believe that it's fair, so you won't question why so many are left behind. So you won't ask why billionaires exist while nurses sell plasma to afford rent. So you'll keep working, keep consuming, keep obeying. Because as long as you believe in meritocracy, you'll never realize it's not designed to lift you up. It's designed to keep you in place, obedient, exhausted, alone. In the fairy tale of meritocracy, every child begins with the same chance. But in reality, some are born with silver spoons, others with scars. We are told, success comes to those who work for it. But we are never told that some inherit success before they've even lifted a finger. They inherit wealth, networks, reputations. You inherit struggle. You see, meritocracy assumes a blank slate, but the world is anything but blank. It's a chessboard set long before you arrived, and the pieces are not equal. One child is born in a penthouse, with access to elite schools, healthcare, private tutors, and capital to take risks. Another is born in a crumbling apartment, where even dreams feel expensive. And yet both are told, you can be anything you want, if you just try hard enough. That's not motivation. That's manipulation. This lie of equal opportunity hides the machinery of class. It erases the invisible head start of the privileged and turns systemic barriers into personal blame. Can't pay for college? You're lazy, struggling with 2 jobs? You're not ambitious enough, falling behind on rent? You must have made bad choices. No mention of rising tuition, no mention of stagnant wages, no mention of inherited privilege, just blame. Endless, silent blame. Marx saw it clearly. The ideas that rule in society are those of the ruling class, and what better idea to protect their power than the myth that power is earned? It keeps the working class busy proving they deserve to live. It keeps them divided, competing over scraps instead of uniting to question why the table is so small in the first place. Meritocracy doesn't explain the world, it disguises it. It's the makeup on a broken system, the smile on a wage slave, the trophy given not for winning but for obeying the rules of a rigged game. And this illusion, it's not just structural, it's personal. It gets inside your head. It tells you that if you're poor, it's because you're not enough. It whispers that your pain is private, that your failures are shameful, so you hide, you pretend, you work harder. trying to outrun the truth you were never meant to see, that the system was never broken. It was built this way. Picture this. A man wakes up before dawn, exhausted. He stares at the ceiling, heart pounding, rent due. He doesn't love his job, doesn't feel seen, doesn't feel safe, but he shows up anyway, not because he believes, but because he's afraid not to. This is the silent power of meritocracy, not in its promises, but in how it disciplines. When you believe that hard work equals worth, you work yourself into the ground, not for growth, but to escape shame. Meritocracy teaches obedience through guilt. It doesn't need a boss yelling orders. It just needs your internal monologue. Keep pushing, don't complain, everyone else is doing it. That's the brilliance of the myth. You become your own supervisor. You punish yourself for being tired. You silence your own discontent. The oppressed are allowed once every few years to decide which particular representatives of the oppressing class are to represent and repress them. Karl Marx. And so you go on, smiling in Zoom meetings, apologizing for taking sick days, posting about productivity hacks like a prisoner bragging about how fast he mops the floor. This isn't freedom, it's internalized control. They don't need to chain your body if they've already captured your mind. Capitalism doesn't just exploit labor, it colonizes self-worth. It takes your exhaustion and markets it as ambition. It takes your fear and sells it as drive. You're not working for passion. You're working for permission to feel okay, to feel like you've earned rest, to feel like you're not falling behind, to feel like you matter. But how can you matter in a system that only values output? You are not a human being. You are a productivity unit. And when your value is tied to your performance, then burnout becomes your identity, and slowing down feels like dying. This is not by accident. It's design. A well-trained labor force, too exhausted to rebel, too divided to organize, too obedient to dream. They told you the system rewards the best. But in truth, it rewards the quiet, the compliant, the ones too busy surviving to question why survival is so hard. And the moment you do question it, they call you lazy, ungrateful, a failure, because the myth must be protected at all costs. Even if it costs your life, there's a strange pride in being busy, a sacredness in struggle, as if suffering is proof of your worth. We wear exhaustion like a badge. We celebrate sleepless nights, skipped meals, mental breakdowns, not as cries for help, but as credentials. This is the emotional currency of meritocracy, pain, repackaged as virtue. Because if you're suffering, it must mean you're trying. And if you're trying, it means you're good, right? But what if the suffering is the goal? What if the system depends on your pain to validate itself? Marx warned us, religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world. It is the opium of the people. In modern capitalism, meritocracy is that opium. It numbs the injustice, it sanctifies the grind, it turns struggle into a sign of moral superiority. As long as you keep quiet. Don't ask why your rent is half your paycheck. Don't ask why billionaires earn more in a day than you will in a lifetime. Don't ask why your anxiety is now called hustle. Just suffer, smile, keep going, because your pain is profitable. The longer you believe that your suffering is noble, the less likely you are to demand a world where it's unnecessary. And this belief that your value is earned through struggle, it doesn't just shape your work, it shapes your identity. You start to believe that rest is laziness, that joy is indulgence, that your body is a tool, that your emotions are distractions. You become a product of a system that only values you when you produce, and you begin to treat yourself the same way. It's not just exploitation, it's self-erasure. You cancel your plans, skip your meals, mute your needs, all in the name of making it. But what if making it just means becoming everything they wanted you to be, and nothing of who you really are? What if the meritocratic dream isn't a ladder, but a treadmill? No matter how fast you run, you're still in the same place, still chasing, still empty, and yet, you keep going. Because to stop feels like failure, to rest feels like guilt. This is how the myth survives, by turning your suffering into silence, by convincing you that your worth must be earned and that you're never quite enough. They don't need fences to trap you. They just need mirrors. Endless reflections of other people's lives, curated, polished, and out of reach. Welcome to the digital marketplace of merit, where comparison is constant and insecurity is the product. You scroll through success stories, a 22-year-old with a startup, a couple who retired at 30, a stranger who turned their side hustle into an empire, and you think, what am I doing wrong? Because meritocracy has moved from the factory floor to the timeline, from the sweatshop to the screen. Your labor isn't just physical now, it's emotional, performative, perpetual. You are always on, always branding, always building a version of yourself that looks successful enough to be loved, not just by employers, but by your peers, your followers, your family. Meritocracy has become a spectacle, not just about what you earn, but how you appear. It's not enough to work. You have to prove it, post it, package it. And this performance, it's exhausting, but it's also isolating. Because the more you compare, the more you compete. And the more you compete, the more you disconnect from those around you. You see them not as comrades, but as metrics, as proof that you are falling behind. And so the system wins again, not just by exploiting your labor, but by severing your solidarity. The free development of each is the condition for the free development of all. Karl Marx. But meritocracy tells you the opposite, that your success must come at someone else's expense, that there's only so much room at the top, that you must outwork, outsmart, outperform. So you chase alone. And in that loneliness, you become easier to control, easier to manipulate, easier to sell to. Because a person who feels like they're not enough will buy anything to feel whole. This is the engine of late capitalism, turning your need for meaning into market demand. Every failure becomes a funnel, every doubt a data point, every insecurity an opportunity to profit. You're not chasing freedom, you're chasing the illusion of it. You're not building a better life, you're building a better version of yourself for others to consume. And in that process, you lose sight of who you are. You're no longer a person, you're a product. What happens when you start to question it? When the gears begin to grind in your mind and you wonder, what if it's all a lie? You feel it first as a whisper, a quiet discomfort, a sense that something doesn't add up. You work, you try, you bleed, but nothing changes. The ladder stays just out of reach no matter how high you climb. And so you speak, you say it out loud, you ask, why is it this way? And suddenly, the air grows cold, people shift in their seats, friends call you bitter, coworkers go quiet. Don't be negative, you just have to want it more. You're making excuses. Because in a meritocracy, critique is betrayal. To question the system is to threaten everyone who's invested in its illusion. Everyone who has built their identity on the idea that their success is proof of their virtue, their pain, their sacrifice. It all has to mean something. If the game is rigged, then maybe they didn't win. Maybe they just survived. That's too much to bear. So they shut you down, not with chains, but with shame. You become the complainer, the ungrateful one, the failure who didn't try hard enough. And so many go quiet again. They bury their questions, mute their doubts, go back to grinding. Because it's safer to believe than to see. Safer to suffer silently than to admit the system never had a place for you. Safer to fake hope than face despair. Marx said, "The class which has the means of material production at its disposal has control at the same time over the means of mental production." They don't just own the factories, they own the narratives, the success stories, the TED Talks, the Instagram Reels, the bookshelves filled with "How I Made It" by people who never had to start where you did. And so, your silence is not a glitch, it's a goal, a system that isolates the discontented, that individualizes failure, that pathologizes resistance. If you're depressed, it's a chemical imbalance, not a rational response to exploitation. If you're burned out, take a vacation, not collective action. If you're angry, meditate. Don't organize. This is how the machinery of meritocracy neutralizes revolt. By turning systemic suffering into private struggle. By convincing the worker that the problem is within, when it has always been without. You are not broken. You are responding to a broken world. They told you it's all about choices, that your life is the result of what you decided, that your station, your salary, your suffering is a reflection of your personal decisions. But what if the menu you were given was already rigged? What if the options were never truly yours to begin with? From the moment you're born, your path is carved by forces you never consented to. The zip code you grow up in, the schools you attend, the stress your parents carry, the color of your skin, the weight of your accent, the debt you inherit, the doors that open, the ones that slam. And yet meritocracy dares to call this freedom. It tells you that you are the captain of your fate, but hands you a ship with no sails. You didn't choose to live in a world where healthcare is a luxury, where working 40 hours a week still leaves you hungry, where rent costs half your income and college chains you in debt before your first paycheck. And still, they tell you to choose better. What a cruel trick. Men make their own history, Marx wrote, but they do not make it under circumstances chosen by themselves. But under meritocracy, history is erased. Context is erased. All that remains is your will, your merit, as if your will alone can undo centuries of oppression, as if your motivation can overcome monopolized power. This is how capitalism protects itself, by mystifying the conditions it creates, by pretending the playing field is level, when the ground itself is tilted by design. You see, if they can convince you that it's all about your choices, they never have to answer for theirs. They never have to justify poverty, or explain why CEOs make 400 times more than workers, or admit that the American dream was built with stolen land, unpaid labor, and systemic violence. They just point the finger at you. You should have worked harder. You should have studied something else. You should have known better. But what if you did everything right and still lost? What if the game isn't winnable unless you were born holding the scoreboard? This is the silent violence of meritocracy. It punishes you for outcomes you didn't control and calls that justice. It denies history, it denies structure, it denies truth. And in that denial, it protects power. Because if success is just about effort, then the powerful must deserve their power. And if the poor suffer, it must be because they didn't try. That's the story they sell. And every time you buy it, you buy your own silence. Success, the golden word, it sparkles on magazine covers, echoes through graduation speeches, glows in every ad, every podcast, every influencer's story. But what is it really? A job title, a six-figure income, a minimalist home and a full passport? Or is it just another product, packaged, polished, and sold to you as the one thing that will finally make you whole? In capitalism, success becomes fetish, not in the erotic sense, but in the Marxist sense. A commodity worshipped for its surface, stripped of the labor, pain, and sacrifice that created it. It's no longer about what success is, but what it looks like. Who cares how someone got rich? Inherited wealth, exploitative business, speculation. It doesn't matter. If they have the look, the clothes, the smile, the story, they're praised. Because in a meritocracy, the result justifies everything. It doesn't matter if a millionaire hoards wealth while their workers survive on food stamps. It doesn't matter if a self-made CEO built their company on the back of unpaid interns and burned out staff. All that matters is they made it. We worship the image. And in that worship, we lose our capacity to question. Fetishism turns the success story into a moral tale. This person is rich, therefore they must be good. This person is poor, therefore they must be lazy. It hides the blood in the bricks. It hides the struggle, the exploitation, the imbalance. And it teaches you to chase the image, not the reality. You spend your life trying to appear successful, because being isn't enough anymore. You buy things you can't afford. You curate your identity. You turn your life into a brand, Because meritocracy doesn't reward truth. It rewards performance. You must always be visible, always be improving, always be more. And what happens when you achieve it? When you finally get the job, the car, the applause? Often, nothing. Because the success was never designed to satisfy. It was designed to keep you chasing. That's how the system sustains itself, by selling dreams it has no intention of fulfilling. Marx called this commodity fetishism, when social relationships are disguised as relationships between things. And in a meritocracy, you don't see the worker behind the wealth. You don't see the hours, the sweat, the despair. You just see the final product and assume it was earned. But what if the object of your desire was built on someone else's exhaustion? What if the success you chase is someone else's cage? And what if, by pursuing it, you become a prisoner too? They called it the ladder. Climb it, they said, one rung at a time, from struggle to success, from survival to comfort, from obscurity to respect. But what if the ladder was an illusion? What if the only people climbing are the ones being used to hold it up? Meritocracy sells a promise of mobility, that through effort, anyone can rise, that the poor can become rich, that the worker can become the boss. But here's the truth. For everyone that rises, millions stay where they are, not because they didn't try, but because the system requires inequality to function. Capitalism doesn't need everyone to rise. It needs most people to stay down. Because who will clean the offices? Who will drive the deliveries, stock the shelves, prepare the food? Who will build the life that someone else gets to live? The ladder must always have a bottom, and someone must always be on it. So, they dangle the dream. They show you the rare exceptions, the rags to riches stories, the 1 in a million shots, and they call it proof. But statistically, upward mobility is a myth for most. Especially if you're born working class, especially if you're black, brown, immigrant, disabled, or undocumented. The higher you try to climb, the fewer the rungs. Not because you're not good enough, but because there's no room. The top is already full, and the system was never built to expand, only to exploit. Marx understood this structure well. The accumulation of wealth at one pole is, at the same time, the accumulation of misery at the opposite pole. The wealth of the few is built on the labor of the many. Your ambition is not the problem. Your work ethic is not the problem. The problem is that no matter how high you climb, you are still standing on someone else's back. And when you finally make it, if you do, the price is often your health, your time, your soul. This is the final betrayal, when the dream comes true and still doesn't set you free. Because success in a meritocracy often means becoming the very thing that exploited you. The oppressed turned manager. The worker turned overseer. The survivor turned symbol. But inside, you still carry the weight, still feel the dissonance, still hear the whisper, "This isn't what I thought it would be." Because deep down, you know, the real victory is not reaching the top. It's dismantling the ladder. You've been told the system is broken, that something went wrong, that with the right policies, the right leader, the right mindset, it can be fixed. But what if it was never broken? What if this exhaustion, this inequality, this quiet despair is exactly what it was designed to produce? What if the pain you feel isn't a malfunction, but a feature? You've been climbing, striving, performing, believing that one day it'll all be worth it. That one day you'll arrive. But the finish line keeps moving. The rules keep shifting. The rewards keep disappearing. And deep down, you start to see it. This system doesn't want your liberation. It wants your loyalty. It wants your obedience. It wants you to question yourself, not the structure. To blame your failures on your flaws, not the forces that profit from your suffering. Because a worker who believes in meritocracy will work harder for less, will fight alone, will stay quiet. And that is the system's greatest success. Marx didn't just analyze capitalism, he exposed its spiritual violence. The ideas of the ruling class are In every epoch, the ruling ideas. And in our epoch, that ruling idea is merit. It says, you are what you achieve. It says, your value is conditional. It says, you must earn the right to exist. But you were never meant to prove your worth. You were never meant to trade your soul for a salary. You were never meant to perform your humanity for profit. So what now? Now you see. Now you know. That meritocracy is not freedom. It's a leash made of gold. That the system isn't broken. It was built this way. And that your pain is not personal. It is political. So breathe. Let the illusion collapse. Let the myth unravel. And in its place, imagine something different. Not a world where a few rise, but where none must fall. Not a world of ladders, but of bridges. Where your value is not measured by output, but honored by your existence. Where solidarity replaces silence. Where truth replaces performance. Where freedom means more than the right to compete. It means the right to live, to rest, to be. Have you ever wondered why your best never feels like enough? Why rest feels like guilt, and joy feels like a reward you haven't earned? Have you ever questioned who benefits from that belief? Maybe it's not you. Maybe it never was. What if your exhaustion isn't proof of your ambition, but evidence of your exploitation? What if your self-doubt isn't a flaw, but the residue of a system that profits from your insecurity? And what if you're not alone in feeling this way? You're not lazy. You're not broken. You're not failing. You're awakening. You're beginning to see the outline of a truth long buried, that your worth is not defined by productivity, that your spirit was never meant to be monetized, that your life belongs to you. As Marx said, the philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it. And that change begins not with protest signs or policy shifts, but with a revolution inside your mind. By questioning what you were taught, by unlearning obedience, by reclaiming your time, your voice, your value. The myth of meritocracy only survives as long as we believe it. So ask yourself, what could your life look like if you no longer had to earn your right to exist? What would our world become if we stopped climbing the ladder and started tearing it down? If this video brought you clarity, leave your thoughts below. Share it with someone who needs to hear this, and join us for the next chapter in this unfolding awakening. The quiet revolution has already begun. It begins with you.